everyone, and welcome to That Christian Nerd YouTube channel. Definitely a name change from what we had before. Speaking of which, today, or excuse me, August is my 1 year anniversary making content online. So that's why you see the name change and the profile picture change and things like that. And hopefully, there will be some other changes as the month goes on that will be beneficial for you guys and for myself included. With that said, I just have a couple of announcements. So, my early fall class for college is going to be starting soon, and I'm also going to be working at the same time. So, I'm not sure how content is going to be in terms of a schedule for the next month, and then continuing on after that into the semester. So, definitely keep that in mind. Be patient with me in that regard. Um, Also, I do have some videos coming up though. I have cared a lot, especially since Men's Mental Health Month. I've cared a lot about mental health and trying to properly understand psychology and trying to help Christians do that as well. And so I'm going to be in regards to that. I'm going to be reacting to a Christian who claimed that uh, she knew the origins of narcissism and it was a spiritual origin. We'll just say that. I'm going to have a video on what is faith, looking at that from a biblical perspective and a philosophical perspective. Uh, and later on, I'm going to have a video on the topic of slavery. I'm still doing a lot of research on that, both in the Old and New Testament, as well as ancient Near Eastern culture and church history, because I think all four of those aspects is really important to get a sort of comprehensive picture of what we're dealing with here and what the church needs to talk about. So with all of that said, let me go ahead and bring my guest on for today. His name is Unquestionable Calvin. Check the links down in the description below to see all the his TikTok and his other social medias. But go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Hey, thanks, Izzy, for having me on. I appreciate you taking the time and reaching out to me to have you on your show. Yeah, I guess anyone who isn't familiar with me, my name is Calvin Smith. I'm a content creator. I first made my outing making content, internet content, with my podcast, Unquestionable with Calvin Smith. RIP to my podcast. I recently ended the show.
Oh, how come?
Yeah, I actually ended the podcast just because I've got a lot on my plate. I'm a really busy guy, and I think that the show had a really good run. And I guess speaking of which, my show is about talking to people about what they believe and why they believe it. So I had everything from conspiracy theorists, like I had flat earthers, people who believe they've been abducted by aliens, people who believe that they can channel aliens,
Oh,
psychics,
wow.
astrologers, everything from them to professional Egyptologists and
Hmm.
geologists and NASA scientists. Christians, I've had pastors on, I've had Satanists and Hindus, Sikhs, so people of all
That
shapes
is
and sizes. If you have a deeply held belief, I want to talk about it, because I want to know as many true things as possible. And the only way I'm going to know that is by talking to people about what they believe and if they have reason and evidence to justify believing in what they believe. So it's essentially a show about pleading your case. And that was kind of my first internet outing. And now I kind of make content mostly on TikTok. I've got about 24,000 followers on TikTok now, making content primarily on atheism and skepticism. I consider myself an ex-conspiracy theorist, which, I mean, we can get more into that later, is what that means to me and why I consider myself that. And I guess you could consider myself an ex-Christian as well. I wasn't as heavy into Christianity as I was into conspiracies, but I guess at one point you could consider myself a Christian. Now I'm happily a godless heathen, and and yeah, I just like to talk to people about what they believe and why. And I volunteer for a secular nonprofit here in Southeast Michigan. I'm their social media manager, and I run a couple events through them. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
That's really cool, and I definitely share your sentiments there. I would love to, because I named this kind of the nerd vision in order to have people of all different kinds of backgrounds who
Yeah, for
kind
sure,
of just met the qualification of just being nerdy, so we could talk and have those conversations and things like that. So I think that's really important. Um,
for sure.
so with all of that said, though, why did you leave? Well, I guess I can guess why, but what brought you out of conspiracy theories, and then what brought you out of Christianity, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am a Christian, but I'm very interested in both. I find them really fascinating. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I guess a little bit from the beginning. Around 6, 7, my parents split up. That's when we were going really, really heavy into church. Almost, every Sunday, maybe even 2 or 3 times a week, we'd head to church. I was doing like, little sermons. My mom was just telling me stories about how she remembers me standing up on the pedestal with the preacher, grabbing his Bible and trying to, preach to the masses. I don't remember this, but she vividly remembers me doing all of this as a very young child.
Oh,
Once my parents split up, we couldn't continue going to church. So my mom, being a single mom, just couldn't do it. Kind of was set on the back burner. But there's a lot of superstition in my family. There's a lot of indigenous people in my family, a lot of those
oh,
types of superstitions from, Cherokee traditions.
hmm,
And so that kind of was more forefront than Christianity was. So like my sisters were very, very into like aliens and, cryptids and all that kinds of stuff, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, etc. when I was very young. And they kind of indoctrinated me into believing that these things were real, and at the same time, my mom pointing the finger and saying, "Hey, watch out, Jesus is watching." Um, so it was just kind of a lot of finger waving for the God stuff. But it was kind of put on the back burner. If someone asked me, I would consider myself a Christian. I would tell them I'm a Christian. And there came a point to where I was very deep in it. Any conspiracy theory, legit. If you can think of any conspiracy theory, I would probably believe it, or I did actually believe it.
hmm,
I was basically convinced of everything and anything I read on the internet. And I got down to writing blogs about alien species and believing that the earth is flat and that aliens or reptilians are running the government. Hillary Clinton's a reptile. Justin Bieber's a
wow.
right hand man and is also a reptilian. Um, all that kind of stuff. But it came to a point where I was kind of agnostic at this point. I was leaning more towards the theistic point that the Christian God was the real God, but I wasn't really sure yet. So I asked my family, what should I do? My family said, well, pick up a Bible that you'll know for sure. So I picked up a Bible. I picked up a King James version. Just as a heads up, King James is not a good first Bible read through version. I learned that very quickly. I picked it. I tried my best to read it from cover to cover. I did skip over a lot of it, like a lot of the small books, a lot of the long, begats and stuff. I was, he begat who,
That's fair.
skipped all that and just read it to the best of my ability. By the end of it, I was like, okay, if this God is real, bottom line, if he's real, I don't think I want anything to do with that God. Bottom line, I don't know if he's real, but I don't want anything to do with him either way. And so that's when I started taking a step back and saying, okay, if I'm this skeptical about my religious beliefs, what about my conspiracy theories that I'm so heavily indoctrinated in? How much have I actually looked into those things? Like I looked into the Bible. And so I guess you can kind of thank the Bible for giving me the gumption to look more deeply into the beliefs that I had as far as conspiracies go. So started looking more into those, became less and less convinced of the conspiracy theories that I believed, like flat Earth and reptilians running the government and aliens and such. And eventually just kind of started digging myself out of those things. And I mean, even to this day, that was probably, I think it was 2016 was the first time I read the Bible. And then I read it again. About a little more than a year ago, I read it again. And I tabbed it up. I don't have my fancy tabbed up Bible on me. It's in my car right now. But yeah, I read it again just to be absolutely sure. And then I said, okay, this didn't happen.
Mm,
Some of this happened, but I'm pretty positive that most of this did not happen. So that's kind of where I'm at, is that I wasn't convinced of the Bible, so I picked up a Quran because Muslims were telling me to pick up a Quran. That's the truth. Nothing in there either. And then Hindus were saying pick up the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, so I picked that up too. Not convinced of it. Mormons saying pick up the Book of Mormon, you'll be convinced. I read the Book of Mormon, I'm not convinced. So it's kind of going down the line of, okay, these religions are making claims about reality, and I want to know what they have to say about these claims. And if they're claiming that the book is the evidence, I should be convinced by the end of it, right? Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. So I now consider myself an atheist. I don't believe in any of the gods that I know of at this moment. And I'm still kind of digging myself out of conspiracy theories. There's still one or two in there that creep up every now and then, but it's a work in progress. I was very heavily indoctrinated for a while.
Yeah, no, and just as an encouragement, take your time to get out of those conspiracy theories and stuff like that.
Yes,
If it is as heavy as you're saying it is, then it's not going to be easy to get rid of at all. It's going to
exactly. Yeah.
need time. Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Um,
Yep.
so so as I was watching your content, there are definitely some things that I agree on and that I appreciate. So I do just want to express those as we're building a bridge. Um,
Okay.
I definitely appreciate the fact that you have read the text.
Yes.
um, I don't. I We might still disagree on some of the interpretations, and we might get into that, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that you have read this cover to cover because I do find that a lot of people um, don't, or they will horribly misunderstand and misrepresent church history or the biblical text. So it's always
Exactly.
like somewhat frustrating uh, when you have an atheist who's like quoting Psalm 137, right? Dash your babes against the rocks, and like is quoting that and saying how horrible the Bible is for commanding this, or they say, hey, the Council of Nicaea gave you your books. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah,
So
no, and I share that frustration. There's even atheists on the internet like TikTok and such that, I come across, and it's very, very obvious from some of their videos that they really don't know what they're talking about. They probably read a verse or two on, a blog or something, or maybe watched the Atheist Experience or something and heard a verse, and they're taking it and running with it. And that's not the honest thing to do. I can't honestly dismiss the claims of the Bible unless I know what the Bible has to say and the context behind those claims. You need to know I mean, I hate to be that guy, but you do need to know the context. The context does matter.
yeah,
Um, to an extent. We could probably dig into that more, but it does matter, So I encourage all if you're atheist and you're coming from Christianity, if you're deconverting or you're in your deconstruction process, read the Bible. I was deconstructing and I read the Bible just to be sure. If you're Muslim, read the Quran. If you're Mormon, read the Book of Mormon. It's all but a requirement in my eyes. I mean, personally for me, I just don't think you can truly call yourself a good Christian or a good, knowledgeable Christian until you have read what your God even has to say. That's just my
that's
personal opinion. But
no, that's totally fair. We definitely have many quotes from church fathers and many others that stress the importance of the understanding and memorization even of scripture, and it's something that I'm starting to work on too.
mhm.
Just as a clarification question, do you just read the books or look into the evidence of the books?
Yes, absolutely. I look into the evidence of the book. So it sucks. I don't have my nice tabbed up Bible on me. It's way in the
Yeah,
other
just
room.
as a thing,
But
guys, he does have a tabbed up Bible that does look really nice, and
yes,
he has a lot.
if you follow me on TikTok at Unquestionable Calvin, I have tons and tons and tons. I just posted a video today explaining the tabs in the book and that people want to buy the book off of me. It's basically my own Skeptics Annotated Bible. It's
Yeah,
one that I made myself. I read it from every single word. I didn't skip a single page, a single sentence. If I had any quarrels with anything that I read on a page, I highlighted it, underlined it, circled it, researched it, and then tabbed it however my index worked with it. And I have well over 500 tabs in my Bible. So
mhm,
there's a lot that I have looked into. So I've definitely looked into the scientific claims, the historical claims, so on and so forth. So yes, it's not something that I just read it and discounted it. I looked into every single claim that I saw in it.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I do appreciate that, and I do find it really interesting that people like um, both of us can be reading the text and do the exact same thing, but
Mhm.
we'll come to very different conclusions.
Yes, that is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And another thing too that I do appreciate just from the atheist community in general is that you guys are trying to hold Christians accountable
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
things that they say and do. You and I would agree with this. But yeah, I saw that you reposted a video on TikTok of Christy. reacting to a sermon from Stephen Furtick where
Yes.
he was um, apparently God told him something wrong about or something about anxiety that was very wrong. Um, and
Yes.
I yeah, and so I definitely share the sympathies. That's why I created the Christian Stop Being Goofy series because I find it, I find it ridiculous that the only people holding Christians accountable, as far as I can tell online, are like pagans, witches, atheists, and progressive Christians. It's like that's
Yeah.
not good. You know what
Exactly.
I mean?
No, I agree.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One of my I think my first Christian Stop Being Goofy video was I don't know if you heard the sound on TikTok, but it's supposed to be an argument, and it says something like uh it someone's quoting someone saying Christianity is man-made, and then the Christian responds by saying, okay, well then why does everything about it go against man's desires? And it's supposed to be like this mic drop moment, you know what I'm talking about?
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah, and I was I thought that was so silly because we're just totally forgetting that that's how humans work.
Yes.
Like,
Exactly.
we engage in a social contract that requires us to withhold certain desires from us. That's how people get into gangs, right? You know, they have to do something they might not like, but they have to suppress that to join and to stay, right?
Exactly.
And I also I in my original video I mentioned the fact that Buddhism is literally, at least some forms of it, is a religion that tells you you need to fast from your desires, and that
Mhm.
doesn't and that's not gonna make it true to any Christian. So,
Yeah,
it would
exactly. No, I
it
agree.
just doesn't work.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah, but yeah, so, there is a lot another thing I'll sympathize with you as well on is that there are a lot of Christians who think that you just can't understand the Bible if you're an atheist. Like, I don't know if you saw the conflict between, Dan McCullen and, um, True I think it was True Christian Ministry and another guy, Blake, that got involved because it
Mm.
was a whole thing about, like, how involved the Holy Spirit is in understanding the text, and I thought it was kind of funny because Blake said that he doesn't have a PhD or a scholarship, but all he needs is the Bible and the Holy Spirit. So then he tries to disprove Dan just using the Bible and the Holy Spirit, and then Dan responds, and I think actually does a good job of refuting some of the things that he said. And probably like the worst moment in that exchange itself was just that um, Blake correlated two verses together because they in English there's a they translate two different words with the same English word.
Mhm. Right, right.
And then Dan pointed that out and said, "No, these are 2 different words, and they don't exactly mean the same thing. This is a fault of the translators." And of course, I would agree that that's something you would only know if you're engaging in the original languages, and you have to go to scholarship for that,
Yeah.
right? And so, but with that said, though, I do agree that an atheist and a Christian and others, even Muslims and right and others, can also understand the text as well, even if we're coming to different conclusions on it. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone interprets it different, but bottom line, I mean, the book is written. It's what it says is what it says. I mean, everyone can interpret it their own way. They can misinterpret it, but bottom line, we have the text. Well, we have the English version of the text, I guess you could say. We don't necessarily have any quote unquote original Bible to like look back on and actually confirm with. Um, but what's funny is while we're on this subject, actually at the end of this month, as I mentioned before, I volunteer for a nonprofit here in Southeast Michigan. It's called the Secular Alliance of Michigan, and I volunteer for Michigan Atheists as well. Michigan Atheists is actually the oldest secular nonprofit organization in the country, by the way. We
oh,
came before American. We act the same person who made Michigan Atheists opened American Atheists. Funny enough.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So back in 1974, that's the very first secular nonprofit organization. It's Michigan Atheists, and I'm the social media manager of them. Anyways, at the end of August 29th, where we actually have David Fitzgerald, who is a notable Bible scholar. He's written books like Jesus Mything in Action and Top 10 Myths That Prove Jesus Christ Never Existed at All. He's actually coming out to Detroit here, and we're going to have a little tour with him at the University of Michigan, where the University of Michigan has on display some of the world's oldest original biblical texts on papyrus. It's very interesting. I've never actually been there myself. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to bring David Fitzgerald there. We're going to tour this exhibit with him, and we're going to compare how the Bible has changed from all the way back, multiple centuries back, what they have on papyrus to what the Bible says now. We're just going to have a little fun comparing as to how the Bible has changed over time using a literal biblical scholar and Jesus mythicist with us. So that'll be a very interesting event. So, I mean, if anyone's in Southeast Michigan, knows about David Fitzgerald, come on and hang out with us on August 29th. It should be some fun.
No, yeah, that would be really interesting. I find this is a well, I have a different thing I want to relate to before we do get into like the major disagreements. But there is a scholar on TikTok who basically said that Jesus mythicists is comparable in academia to flat earthers.
I
And
would not agree.
I thought it was interesting because I find I do obviously a something being a minority position doesn't make it false, but it does seem that it is a minority even among critical scholars and more progressive Christians who would accept those certain conclusions, and take that into their account of Christianity. They would still say, yeah, Jesus probably existed at least. What we know
Right.
about him and what he said and all that stuff we can talk about, but he at least existed. But
Mhm.
one other thing too, though, that I want to get into is that, and this we can transition into our disagreements from here, is that a lot of Christians don't understand atheism,
Yes.
which is really weird to me. I don't understand why it's that hard. um, and it's especially weird for Christians because Christians of all people should understand that one label has not everyone agrees that affirm this one label, right?
Hmm.
So, a LaVeyan Satanist and a atheistic Buddhist are not in agreement, even though they're both atheists, right?
Exactly.
Um, so to help us understand, tell us how you understand your own atheism.
So, kind of where I'm coming from is it's funny. I had one of my neighbors message me on Facebook yesterday because he saw I do the event, the Ask an Atheist event through the Secular Alliance of Michigan, where we kind of do street epistemology. I grab a big sign that's actually sitting right behind me on this side. It says Ask an Atheist on it. You probably can't see it. It's a little bit out of frame. There it is.
Ah,
Um, but I bring this sign and I go to a local park near me, and I stand out there with this big sign, couple pamphlets, and I have a sticker that says, "I'm an atheist, ask me anything." And that's quite literally the point of the entire program, is to defeat the misconceptions behind atheism. And, if people have an honest question about atheism, they don't know what it is, how someone can be an atheist, come on and ask one. We're not that scary, is essentially what I'm trying to,
I
to
mean, true.
so, I don't know. Some of us are pretty scary, but I like to think I'm not too much of a scary guy. So, I so a big thing about atheism is that a lot of people believe that atheism is a positive affirmation that there is no God. It is a positive claim that there is no God. When that's arguably the biggest misconception behind atheism. So I come from the position of agnostic atheism. Agnosticism and atheism are two different positions. Agnosticism is a position on knowledge, and atheism is a position on belief. So you can be an agnostic atheist by saying, I don't believe that a God exists because I don't have evidence to warrant believing in it. Once there's evidence presented, I'll happily believe it, but I'm not closed off and I'm not saying that there is no God. I just don't believe you until you prove it. Or you could be a Gnostic atheist where you're claiming there is no God. I can prove there is no God, but then the burden of proof lands on your end. And sorry, but you can't prove there is no God. You can't. If someone can, they're happy to do that for me. And, I'll be in the same position as them. Just as the same as you can be an agnostic theist where you believe that there is a God, but you can't demonstrate and prove that there is one. You just believe that there is. Or you can be agnostic theist, where you claim that there is a God and I can prove it. And sorry, but you can't. Because here we are thousands and thousands of years into human civilization. Not a single God has been able to be demonstrated as truth. So sorry, but everyone's agnostic. Every single person. Whoever's watching this, you're an agnostic. You're either an agnostic theist, where you believe that there is a God but can't prove it, or you're an agnostic atheist, where you don't believe in a God but you can't prove it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And that's arguably the biggest misconception about atheism.
Gotcha. Okay, that's understandable. So do you so I was actually thinking about this earlier too, and realizing that like um we wouldn't necessarily call someone who's spiritual an atheist, but if atheism is taking a position that relates to God and God alone, then it doesn't even necessarily relate to other spiritual beings that could exist.
Mhm.
Right,
Right.
so you could even believe that we are, um, we have spirits and those spirits can do things, but still technically be an atheist if you're applying that only to God and not, um, uh, bringing more baggage on top of that, like naturalism or materialism, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, when I first considered myself an atheist, when I first came out and said, I am atheist, that's where I'm coming from. I still was a conspiracy theorist. So I still said, okay, a God didn't create us, but aliens did, and then it's like, okay, I just switched over the burden of proof. Instead of a God, I'm saying aliens, but I can't prove aliens did it either. And then I'm pointing to Roswell and the pyramids and, Pumapunku and Gobekli Tepe and, you know, all these different conspiracy theories I'm pointing back to. So it's just one and the same. I mean, I'm not able to prove aliens created us as much as, God is creating us.
Gotcha, yeah, that's understandable. So you talked to us a little bit about your journey. When was that moment when you said, "Yeah, I'm an atheist"? And I guess what I asked, was there relief or was there pain that came with that admission?
Um, a little bit of both. If anything, you could describe it as angst. So, as an ex-conspiracy theorist, I can tell you that the biggest thing with me coming from conspiracy theories is I was on a high horse. I believed that I knew something that even the world's top government officials didn't know, or that they did know but wasn't releasing to the public. I believed that I had some sort of objective knowledge about reality, that we were created by aliens, or the pyramids were built by aliens, or
You not to interrupt, but you do kind of become John the Revelator at that point in some sense.
right.
Yeah.
So basically, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's essentially
Yeah,
okay.
so
So the
I
moment, yeah, the moment of awokeness, I guess you could say, is I read the Bible the first time, right? Didn't necessarily consider myself an atheist by the end of the first read through. I said, okay, I don't know if I believe in this God, but whether there's a deistic God out there, or maybe a God of another religion or something that exists, who's to say that can't happen? And regardless of whether this biblical God exists, I don't want to follow him, even if he does exist. So I still kind of was on the agnostic theist type of position, but I still was heavily indoctrinated in these conspiracy theories. So I was actually working a desk job at the University of Michigan at this time. Had nothing else better to do on my, time off than to sit on my computer and watch debates and listen to podcasts. And so that's when I came across the atheist experience through the atheist community of Austin. And I came across other atheistic programs, and I came across Anthony Magnabosco, who does street epistemology. And I started looking further into these things, and they started talking a lot about conspiracies. And then they made Truth Wanted, which is a whole show about conspiracy theories.
hmm,
And it was kind of through watching those shows that I realized I was able to figure out what questions I needed to ask and what questions I needed answers to, if I could get answers to them. So I was kind of using them as like a starting point. I was using those programs online as a starting point on, okay, they're asking this question. That's a good question. Let me look into that. And I was kind of verifying what they were saying. And then I picked up the Bible again. I started reading it again. And during this time of reading the Bible the second time, I inadvertently was actually indoctrinating myself further into a certain conspiracy theory. I was actually learning about Atlantis. I was learning about, an ancient lost civilization with ancient lost high technology that lived 12,500 years ago. And from Graham Hancock and Bright Insight and all these different historical conspiracy theories. So rather than conspiracy theories revolving around outer space and aliens and extraterrestrials, I started indoctrinating myself into conspiracy theories at the same time of reading the Bible the second time of more, I guess you could say, more reasonable conspiracy theories, things that you can actually look into. So instead of looking up, I was looking down at the earth and looking at
Mm,
ancient sites and saying, okay, what about this ancient site is something that can't be human or can't be of what technology we have today at the very least? Did this ancient lost civilization have a high technology? So this was at the same time I was reading the Bible the second time. I finished the Bible the second time. I'm heavily into the Atlantis conspiracy theory at this time, but at this point, I'm considering myself an atheist. So it kind of was at the same time I was picking up the Bible for the second time and learning about Atlantis that I kind of just came out and said, you know what? I don't think I believe in this anymore. I don't think I believe in a God. I don't really see a reason to believe in a God after watching all these different programs, reading the Bible multiple times, reading other religious texts, asking myself questions, trying to debunk my own religious beliefs. And I'm not able to do that, or I am able to do it. And it's what's bringing me out of it. And so it kind of was at the time I was picking up the Bible the second time that you could consider me saying I was an atheist for the first time. And it was relieving, but at the same time, I wanted to fight about it. Like I was coming off very aggressive because I didn't really understand at that time. Again, I I could quote a lot of the Bible even today, but at that point I couldn't. I didn't know how to really defend. I just kind of wanted to be right. And that comes from the conspiracy mindset that I was on my high horse and I wanted to be right. I thought I knew something that nobody else did, or I don't think this anymore, but I was like the stupid Christians out there and the stupid, Muslims and the stupid Mormons. I was coming from that position. And now I come from more of a position of understanding. I understand why people can read the Bible or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita and believe these things because I was there. I was, instead of reading the Bible and believing it, I was reading, alien articles online and believing it. I was doing the same thing just with a different book.
right.
So now I come from more of a position of understanding, and that's why I want to talk to people about what they believe rather than degrade people about what they believe.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that too. I saw one of your discussions was with a black Christian, and you had specifically mentioned in the video, or in text or in the comment sections, that like you would delete any comments about his appearance, mannerisms,
Yes.
things like that. And
Yes.
I definitely did appreciate that because I am also someone, because I mentioned this in my second account introduction for the new year, but I want everyone to be able to come on and enjoy my content and have a safe space, right? So, uh,
Mhm.
as much as I have made videos about the LGBTQ community, for example, I would love for a lot of my followers to be LGBTQ plus. That would be
Yeah.
fantastic. I would love that. Same thing with atheists and other uh, religions and non-religions as well. So definitely do appreciate that respect.
Yeah.
Um, it is kind of one other thing I'll hit on while we're in this section here. It is kind of interesting that like you came out of religion before you came out of conspiracies, because and this is what I've had to deal with in some of the Christian Stop Being Goofy videos. Like one person claimed that like if Satan was going to pick a language to create a one world government, it would be English because of all the connections to witchcraft apparently or something.
What?
but but it's so interesting because like a lot of the conspiracy theories are religious. Like
You're very right.
there's one video that makes a joke it's a kind of a joking video, and it basically is like I think it's the video says something to the effect of like the history of the world according to the History Channel, I guess. And 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 he says in the video, this is basically religious young earth creationism, well, pluralistic religious young earth creationism, but aliens.
Right. Literally.
I guess was it hard to pull out of religion but still be in conspiracy theories when so much of them were religious, like what you see on the History Channel?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was because of some of the religious conspiracy theories that I was able to kind of start questioning some of those conspiracy theories. Like example, one of the very first biblical conspiracy theories, I guess you could say, was the Dead Sea Scrolls. That was one that I first looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls. I knew nothing about the Bible at this point. Okay. I heard Dead Sea Scrolls and I was like, that sounds fun. Started looking into
Yeah.
it. And I was like, wow, this proves, the Bible. This proves that, Jesus did this and this, and started looking into it more. Honestly, couldn't even tell you anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls anymore. That was what, 6, 7 years ago. I probably looked into that last time. I haven't even looked at it recently.
Mm.
But I just wasn't convinced of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It didn't seem convincing after looking into it. And like I read about Noah's flood. I read, I was like, wow, my whole life I really believed that this happened. I believe that the biblical flood happened. Why would I question it? Why? My whole family says that it happened. Why would I question it? And that's when I kind of looked into the Atlantis conspiracy theories, because Atlantis flooding, civilizations
Oh,
disappearing.
okay.
Like,
So
oh wow, there's quite a connection there.
you thought
Um,
that Atlantis was under the water because of Noah's flood.
Exactly,
Gotcha. Yeah.
exactly. And
Okay.
so it's kind of because of the Atlantis conspiracy theory that I was able to dig myself out of the Noah's flood conspiracy theory, because I started looking into what the Atlantis conspiracy theory was and how that happened. And when all actuality, it's describing a small localized flood in a very small portion of the world rather than worldwide. But these people, you know, 10, 12,000 years ago didn't understand any better. So they just wrote down what they thought was the whole world. So they would put down it's the whole world because what they saw outside is what the whole world was. They didn't know that it was actually just that small localized portion of their community that was getting flooded. Um, so yeah, it was actually because of a lot of biblical conspiracy theories that I was able to start bringing myself out of the other deeper conspiracy theories like flat Earth. And not to say that I don't think that the Bible doesn't necessarily advocate for a flat Earth, but looking into those types of things. And yeah, it's kind of because of those conspiracy theories I started looking into it deeper.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, have you been able to watch any of my content at all?
I watched a couple videos. Yeah, yeah. I haven't. I didn't binge your videos by yet. But yeah, I've watched a good handful of your videos. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that might be a place to start. I don't know what exactly you did watch, but are there any disagreements or agreements that you are aware of with what you did watch?
Not straight off the top of my head. No, not right off the top of my head. Can I think of anything?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's fair. I make a lot of different videos, so that's fair. You might have just seen a video about art then before anything else. Yeah.
Right, right.
So now I have a question, and this could segue into our disagreement. So
Yeah.
um I'll ask you a broad question. What are your views on morality?
So I believe that morality is subjective. That's kind of where I come from. Is that I believe that morality is based off of whatever society that you grew up in. So like you go to, I think I want to say it's Pakistan right now. Maybe I'm mixing up countries, but one country right now, it's a big thing that the women are not wearing their headdresses anymore. They're disagreeing with Sharia law, and they are being punished and in some cases killed. In most cases, these women are being killed, or people in general that are siding with these women that are not wearing their headdresses. And they believe that that is the moral thing to do. That's because their morality is coming from the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita, depending on whatever portion of the world that you're coming from. And so I believe that your morality is based off of whatever society you grew up in. Like here, we believe that, like in my community, at least, we can say that murdering women for not wearing a hat is wrong. Great. I believe that. That's my subjective moral compass, is saying that killing women for not wearing headdresses is wrong. When you go to other countries in the Middle East, and they would disagree, and they would say that killing women for not wearing a headdress is totally moral. That's the most moral thing. That's the most moral high thing that you can do in the name of Allah. So I think that morality is subjective, and it's dependent on whatever society that you grew up in.
Gotcha. Okay, so then I guess have you heard Dr. James White and have you seen him debate?
I don't think name sounds familiar, but I don't recall.
Okay, so he had a so I actually posted this video because I thought it was kind of wild. But so I'll run you through the similar scenario and let me know if you agree. But
Yeah.
James White asked David Silverman, this atheist, he said that if you were standing at the gates of Auschwitz, for example, and and then David White asked him, or David White, James White asked him, all would you just say, for me, this is bad? And then David bit that bullet and said, yeah. And so I guess I would ask you, would that be the same case for you? Would you say, yeah, in my opinion, this is wrong?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, I could stand. Let's say I'm standing there, but there's a Nazi standing there right next to me. I could say this is bad. This is not the right thing to do. I grew up in a society where this is not the right thing to do. But the Nazi says that's literally the right thing to do, is to just kill the Jews. That's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
That's right, in my opinion. So yeah, I would totally agree.
So how can we be justified in trying to stop them if they're not doing something that is objectively wrong?
Because we don't have the authority to end other people's lives or cause bodily harm to other people. That's where I come from. Is regardless of whether I believe it to be true or to be good or to be bad, I don't have that authority. I mean, technically, yes, I could come over and stab someone in the neck and end their life. But is that the maximum thing that I could do for their well-being? So my position is I want to do things that is best for other people's well-being. I don't want to harm other people. I don't want other people to harm me. So it's essentially treating others the way you want to be treated. Would you want to be stabbed in the neck? No. Would you want to be thrown in a gas chamber? No. So why would I want to do that to other people? And it's a matter of like, hey, I can tell people you shouldn't do that, but can I stop them from doing it? I mean, I guess I could force them to not do that, but does that maximize their well-being or my well-being? Well, I guess you could say overall both, because they are coming from a position that they don't understand, or maybe they do understand but don't care, that they are taking the life away from somebody else, or they are harming somebody else, or they're causing bodily harm to somebody else. And I don't have the justification to end somebody's life just because that's what makes me feel good or what makes me happy. So it's a matter of education. So I would say, like Nazis, they're misinformed, they're disinformed. They need to be
Very.
educated.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need to be educated on why killing Jews is not the right thing to do, or building Auschwitz and creating Auschwitz is not a good thing to do, and why Nazism is not the correct position to have, or the position to have that is maximizing well-being for other people. So I kind of look at it as well-being and maximizing happiness would be, I guess you could say, objective morality.
Mm. But you do see how, at least in my understanding, you've almost contradicted yourself if you haven't, because on the one hand, you said that morality is subjective and it's
Mhm.
dependent upon the culture, but on the and you don't have the well, yeah, and that's the thing is that, but on the other hand, you say no one has the authority to harm another human being, um, such that we should actually stop humans from harming other people by, yeah, what we did in World War II. And you say by doing that, we are maximizing pleasure, and that is what we should do. But but that's the thing though, is that you're saying that uh, we ought to do something.
Mhm.
And so I think atheists can have objective morality. I'm not coming from the position where it's like if you don't believe in God, you have absolutely no objective morality. There
Right.
are very good atheist arguments for objective morality. So, and also even as a theist, I think that God, there are plenty of theological reasons as to why I can think that everyone has access to objective morality, particularly knowledge of objective morality combined with empathy. Because if you don't care, then you're not going to want to access the objectivity. Uh, but do you kind of see how it looks like you're contradicting yourself? Because on the, like I said, on the one hand, you're saying, yeah, it's dependent upon the culture, and so things are going to be right and wrong depend on that. But then on the other hand, you're saying, uh, we don't have the authority to do this. We can stop people who are doing this, and we need to be maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. So I would say, because it'd be the same thing as, again, you put me next to Ted Bundy, Ted Bundy, famous, I hate saying famous, but he is, he's a famous, I hate calling serial killers famous, but like, let's be honest, he's pretty famous. Um, you put me next to him, I'm going to tell him, hey, killing people is wrong. And he could come to the position of killing people is right. That's his subjective morality. That's his moral compass, is that he is saying he may have grown up in a society that says that murder is wrong and that killing people and harming others is wrong. But he has diverged from that subjective morality. So he has his own moral compass. I have my own moral compass. Our morals aren't the same. Just like me and you, we have different moral compasses. I'm sure we wouldn't know right here in this conversation, but I'm sure there's things that you could say is a moral thing to do, and I would say that it is a immoral thing to do, or vice versa. And so that's the thing, is that there's not a single starting point that we can look back onto and say, this is what is moral and what is not. I would come from the position that I personally believe that not causing harm to other people is, in my opinion, it's funny.
Right.
Subjectively, I objectively believe that well being is the best thing to do, but somebody else is going to think completely different of me. Am I able to enforce that thing? Well, I mean, yeah, I can stop someone from killing someone. That would be something I would totally be willing to do, regardless of whether someone thinks that it's right or wrong. I would do that.
Mm,
Period. I don't. To be honest, if you're going to try to kill someone in front of me, I'm going to try to stop you. I don't really care whether you think it's right or wrong, because bottom line, yes, we could end someone's life, but we shouldn't. So it's like,
right.
in my opinion,
But
it all
that's
comes down to, in my opinion.
right. But that's kind of what I'm getting at though, is that, I'm not like a body language expert or anything like that, or I can read tone of voice necessarily, but I you're very adamant in very dogmatic in a stance that you would definitely stop someone from trying to kill someone.
Yeah.
Um, I'm saying that I don't know why you wouldn't just say, well, he just disagrees with me.
Because I don't personally think, again, comes back to me, in my opinion, I don't believe that ending someone's life is the moral thing to do, in my opinion. They could do it, but I don't think it is. I mean, if someone wants to stop me and give me an argument as to why they believe ending that person's life is the objectively moral thing to do, cool. I'm open to hearing it, but you're not going to do it unless you plead your case. If you plead your case and you can change your mind and change my mind and explain why it's objectively moral to end someone's life, or to, you know, do something else immoral, cool, I'm right there with you. But bottom line, it comes down to your own opinion, and you believe that you should do this thing, as opposed to looking back at saying, you know, let's say there's a lot of Christians that'll say objective morality comes from God, right, or Jesus. Um, Prove it. Bottom line, it comes down to prove it. If you can prove that the morality of your God is better than my subjective morality, which bottom line, it's going to diverge for a second here while we're on this topic. So I love it when Christians will say that God is the source for objective morality when they don't realize that they're following the subjective opinion of a God. So that would mean that morality would still be subjective because they're believing this God is saying this is what's moral and this is what's not. So you're still following someone else's subjective morality. So even in Christianity and believing that God is the basis for morality, he's the basis for subjective morality because you're following his subjective morality. It doesn't mean that it's objective just because God says so.
That's a very interesting critique. I think I would disagree there. I think that God is goodness itself, and I would hold to the a I forget the exact term, but I hold to a form of divine simplicity that
Hmm.
would say that God is his attributes. So I think that he not only can demonstrate but is love itself, right, and all these other things. And so uh, God can, especially with his knowledge, right, and very and the fact that, like I said, I do believe he is goodness itself. He would know for de facto what is best for us and worst for us, however he decides that is the case. And that would also trickle down into, I think, another disagreement I would have with you is that you sound like you prefer a hedonistic ethic where we should attempt to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Uh,
Hmm.
but I actually disagree. I lean towards I'm a virtue ethicist, basically a
Hmm.
combination of Christian virtue ethics and Christian deontology. So basically, what that means is that I think that God has commanded us to follow certain virtues and to apply those to our life so that we can grow to be people of excellent moral character. And in the Christian context, it would mean growing to be like Christ, which is sanctification, or theosis, how, depending on your Christian tradition. But so with that said, though, that would be another point of disagreement too, is that I think it's impossible to maximize pleasure, um, because people don't even know what that would look like for themselves.
Right.
And then when people get there, it's like, well, actually, all this money's making me depressed. I want a wife, not multiple women. Right. And so it, I, and then you also have another issue too that um, happiness is fleeting, right? But so you need something else to be there when happiness isn't there because it won't always be there. And that's where I think meaning, purpose, virtue, and objective meaning, purpose, and virtue would come in to kind of be that stability when your life is unstable. And so I think that a Christian understanding of virtue ethics and um, deontology and how all of that relates to other things would actually be a better, possibly even for our psychology, than would be hedonism. But let me know what you think about all of that. I said a lot.
Yeah, no, you're good. So I would come from the standpoint, like you said, that God essentially, would be the objective moral thing to do because he's all powerful, all knowing, and such. But bottom line, again, still, it's him saying, whether he knows what is, I guess you could say, quote unquote, good or bad, what is most virtuous to do. He's telling you this is the right thing to do and this is the wrong thing to do. And if you're listening to him, you're listening to his subjective opinion. Whether he knows that it truly is the best or worst thing to do, you're still listening to his opinion, which is subjective. Or to be Christ-like, you are working to be like a subjective, like Jesus, with a subjective person. You're working to be like his subjective morality, Jesus Christ. And I would come from the point of until we can demonstrate that this God does in fact have this knowledge, does in fact know what's right and wrong, does in fact exist, we can't use him as an objective point for morality because we can't even show that he is even there to begin with. So how can we use him as a point for morality?
Yeah, no, that's understandable. To shift slightly, I'm interested in this because so I mentioned this in my last live stream with an atheist, but and this is no offense to you. I think
No, good.
you're
I'm
a
so offended. No.
fine. I think you're a fine person. But I find subjective morality like it gives me a really, really, really bad taste in my mouth because I don't understand how we could do law. I don't understand um, how we could claim that like I don't I don't know, Tony Stark sacrificing himself at the end of Endgame was a objectively good thing to do, or even just a good thing to do. I don't know how we could like tell stories even if we are if morality is dependent upon our mind, right?
Mhm.
And so I kind of I've been looking for other ways that atheists can sort of have an objective morality,
Yeah.
at least consciously. And the two best things that I heard, and I want to get your thoughts on each one of these. So one of the arguments is that it's actually based in evolution. And I found this really fascinating. I'm not a young Earth creationist, so I'm not someone that needs to deny the theory of evolution. Um, but so the notion though is that what we observe in animals, for example, that they will actually take care of their children, right? They will mourn. I believe it's elephants. I believe that
Yeah,
mourn
elephants do
their
it. Some species of monkeys and apes do it. There's, I think dolphins do it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the notion is that we find things in animals, and I did watch some of your TikToks. You seem to really have an affinity for animals and taking care of them
Yes.
and things like that, right?
I
Yeah, yeah.
work with animals for a living. I love animals.
That's cool. No, that's really cool. So it appears that um, they are demonstrating these altruistic traits, and atheism would explain that by saying, yeah, this is how they evolved, and then we have evolved to
Mhm.
demonstrate similar things. So we mourn as well. We can take care of our children too, and various other things because of that. And so it is objective because it's based in the process of evolution. And I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Hmm. Interesting. Objective because of evolution. That's first time I think a first time I've ever heard of that one. That's actually an interesting point to have. Would I agree? So at the same time, I still don't know if I would necessarily call that objective because again, not every animal is the same. Not every animal has the same. There could be two animals from the same species or even the same community group. Let's say we're talking elephants. There could be two mother elephants that both, they both have babies. One of them mourns over their baby, one of them doesn't, because maybe, one of them cared about their young, maybe the other one didn't. Bottom line, it comes down to what they believe was a moral thing to do. I mean, in all actuality, I don't think that animals believe in morality whatsoever. I think
Well,
they're just
yeah.
doing what they do based off of, like you said, evolutionary processes. But they're not doing it for the purpose of well-being or anything. They're doing it on behalf of evolution. So I would say I don't know if I would necessarily call that objective because again, it's not necessarily a external mind or an external opinion
Yeah.
that is setting this basis for why they are mourning their children or why they are performing. In some cases, even if for apes, they may even perform types of funerals.
Yeah.
Um, do I think that that is a sign of objective morality? I would say that it's a sign of animals mourning. I don't even think I would call that a moral standpoint, in my opinion.
Mm. Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, so it might be helpful to define terms real quick. So I'm understanding subjective morality to be dependent upon the mind of an individual,
Mhm.
of a human in particular. relative morality to be a morality that is derived from a culture or society. And then objective just means that this is a fact
Yeah, this
that
is good, this is bad.
right from the mind, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the earth being round would be a fact that's not dependent upon the mind, right?
Mhm.
Uh so if that's how we're understanding the terms, then this evolutionary account of objective morality would be objective because it wouldn't be dependent upon our minds. It would be dependent upon the process that made us. You know what I mean?
Right. But would the ritualistic parts of, let's say, burying, young, or, mourning over people, or, caring for others, grooming other animals, are they doing it because they want to, or are they doing it because that's how evolutionarily they have been brought up and in their community? So is it objective because that's what evolution has taught them, or are they just doing it because they grew up in a community in which this was normal to mourn, to groom, to
I see.
help, to cause well-being? At the same time, it would still, in my opinion, come down to the society that they grow up in.
Yeah, no, that's understandable because you can have animals that act differently depending upon their location. Of course, I do think that is like a part of evolution, but then there's also the fact that we can train dogs to act well,
Right.
right? But
Yeah,
we're
it's a really tricky question that you bring up. I
yeah,
never really heard that evolution being the argument for objective morality. So it's definitely something I'm going to look more into, because now you've piqued my interest.
yeah, no, I found it pretty interesting too, and I think it's a good case. Uh,
Yeah, it honestly it is. It's
I
really, no, you got a good point.
I don't think it obviously I'm still a theist, so I don't necessarily think that it works, mainly because in Charles Darwin, I think literally said this. If we evolved to eat our young, that would then be objectively good, right?
Right.
So then it's and I don't know if that sits well with any of us uh here. Um
Except them dirty baby eating atheists.
yeah, yes. uh
Babies don't even taste good. No, I'm kidding.
Heathen.
You gotta spice them, right?
I love the humor. but but yeah, and then the second argument that I heard that was really interesting. So it looks like the majority of philosophers are moral realists. And then the majority of philosophers, from what I've heard from the studies I've seen or whatever, are atheists. And so one of the things that atheist philosophers have done to ground moral realism is to say that it's just a brute fact. Um, it One atheist philosopher kind of described it in the way that Christians don't believe God was caused, he just is.
Hmm.
So too objective morality was not caused, it just is. And that's just a brute fact of reality. And um I don't want necessarily well, at that point then there is nothing to investigate about its origin because there is no origin. It kind
Yes.
of just
Right.
is. And I don't find that satisfying. I don't know if you do or
Same.
don't.
No, I agree. Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah. But there are atheist philosophers who have written like whole papers defending this particular notion of objective morality, and I found that really interesting. But yeah, I found that um to be very unsatisfying because like
Hmm.
who says that what evidence could you bring? Because I'm not necessarily in the realm of proof. I accept it more like a probabilistic theory of the theory of knowledge of
Yeah.
epistemology of that philosophy. So I think that there is evidence for, in theory, there's evidence for every proposition, and then we just have to see how much evidence um, there is for each proposition in order to believe. I'm not necessarily arguing for proof of much of anything necessarily. Um, but
Mhm.
that's kind of another thing. So, but I guess what evidence could they bring that this is just a brute fact? Because
Got
it seems from what I could tell, obviously not being a philosopher myself, obviously, and some of these papers give me a headache. I it just seems like this is a very strong assertion. Yeah,
right, right. So do you come from the position that the proposition has to exist before there's evidence for it? Do you think that there could be evidence for something that we don't have a proposition for yet?
sure. I
So,
don't
like for example,
see why that would be an issue.
we could have there's going back to my conspiracy theory days. There's an artifact that's called the Antikythera mechanism. It was found off of the coast of I think it was Sicily, if I'm not mistaken. It was found totally in the ocean. It's a total enigma as to what the heck it is. We have been studying it for like 40, 50 years now. We have absolutely no freaking idea what the heck this thing was used for, and it looks like a literal computer. And
Wow,
it literally looks like a
that
computer.
I did
And
not
it's we've
know.
been studying it for a very long time, and nobody knows what the heck it is. It's called the Antikythera mechanism. It's very, very weird. It exists, but we don't have a proposition as to what that thing is exactly. We don't know what the proposition for it is.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, no, I think I would be perfectly fine in saying there is, well, not that there's necessarily evidence for things that don't exist, but that there is everything evidence for things that we have not discovered yet.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah,
Like
I get
like obviously gravity was real and it didn't matter. Well,
right. Yeah, there was evidence for gravity well before we
right.
knew we had the concept, the word gravity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. And I think, and that's actually a good question because that sometimes relates to debates about Trinitarian doctrine. Because as a side tangent, a lot of people who deny the doctrine of the Trinity will say that this doctrine didn't come about either until the Council of Nicaea or until like Tertullian coined the term Trinity, Tertullian being a church father. But of course, the name that is a catch-all for the position does not need to exist for the position itself to exist,
Hmm. Okay.
right? So
Gotcha.
so I even accept something like that as well. Yeah,
Okay. That makes
yeah.
sense.
So I think that uh, there would be evidence. Um, Here we have a comment here. So some scientists say it was used to track the stars.
Yeah, yeah. It's there's some theories that it was used as to be a like a compass, like a nautical compass. Um, it's so weird. So now we're going on a tangent about this mechanism. To look up a picture of it, I was actually trying to get a guest who was very educated in it to be on my podcast. Of course, there's no one who's super educated on it because they don't know what the fuck it is. They don't really know who to like call to look at it. So it's just basically people making theories about it. Yeah, there's some theories that it was used to track the stars, but we don't know how they would have used it to track the stars, let alone how they would have had I mean, if you like look at it, I mean, it looks like it's like a car engine. Like that's how like odd it
Wow. I'm
looks. And
look
this is
I'm
from
looking curious. What's the name
like
of it again?
thousands of years ago. This thing is very old. It's been dated, very old. I forget the exact date that it's brought back to, but it's way older than any computer you could think of. And the fact that we already had nautical compasses, so why would we need this other thing to figure out where we're going?
Right. No, yeah, yeah. What is the name of it again?
It's like the anti-Kytherium mechanism. Let me say anti anti anti-Kytheria mechanism. Yeah, that's what it is. It's
Yeah,
it's a very weird looking thing.
I'm kind of intrigued. Oh, this is weird. Um
And people have made
I
3D
can't guess.
reconstructions of like what it looks like on the inside of it, because on the inside of it, it has like gears and all kinds of weird stuff going on like inside of it that like definitely wasn't common
This
for the
thing?
time. Yeah, it's actually the top left on the second.
This one?
Yeah, that one there, that's actually what it is and what it looks like.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
there's nothing at that time period that looks anything like that, and we don't know what the heck it is.
That is
And
weird.
the one to the left of that, that is a 3D reconstruction of the inside of it. That is all the mechanisms that is inside of that thing.
So do they think it was like a door? That's kind of what this image makes it out to
The
look.
thing is that it's only, yay big. It's only, it's not like giant by any means. It's
Oh,
literally about the size of like my laptop here. It's not very big, but it is pretty darn heavy.
that's so weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird. We have no idea what it is. I was trying to get a guy on my show to talk about it, and then no one would agree to do it. So now I'm
Gotcha.
still up in the dark here.
That's wild. That's wild. But yeah, no, that was a fun side tangent.
Yeah.
I will. I do. You should. We can continue going, but it would be fun to have you on a live stream with me again to like debunk Christian conspiracy theories.
Oh, dude, let's do it.
I think that would be really fun, helpful for people. But
Yeah.
um yeah, so I found, but basically though, I found those are kind of two ways that atheists will ground objective morality, and I found that interesting, and I found the case for evolution in particular to be probably the best because, like I said, it just I can't tell if there's actually evidence that objective morality doesn't have an origin and thus is a brute fact,
Mhm.
or if it would seem more likely that evolution would bring about those things that we consider altruistic, especially for our species to uh, continue surviving, right?
Mhm.
So that would uh, probably make the most sense. But uh, with that said, though, I because of that, I don't. So because I think the theism, even if God does not exist, just like the concept of theism grounding objective morality, I do think is still good, um, good theory at least. And I think that the evolutionary account of objective morality from an atheist perspective would be good. Um, and side tangent. I also don't think that the evolutionary account needs to disprove theism either, because
Yeah.
there are theistic evolutionists, and I have no problem with um, accepting the theory of evolution. Because, like I said, I'm not a young Earth creationist, not anymore. I
Right.
used to be, but that's a whole thing. um, but yeah, and so I just, obviously the topic of morality comes up a lot, and I do think it's really important, at least practically, because people are, even in the church, right? I do a lot of research on religious trauma, and reading that and listening to people's stories, like I am like cried because
Yeah.
of that. I have friends who I have friends who have experienced it, and I can't, I don't know like what else to say in some sense other than, yeah, this was truly wrong.
Yeah.
And the church's opinion does not matter. Right. But like I said, if we do have more subjective morality, then it would be up for debate. You know
Right.
what I mean? And I don't think that something like religious trauma, something like unconsensual activities and things like that. I just don't think that those things are up for debate, especially when
Yeah.
we see how what it causes to us from a scientific level, even how
Exactly.
it
Yeah, I
destroys
mean, like,
the
if
earth.
even, like, a Christian approaches me and says, "I have, I've had personal experiences with God, I've had personal experiences with Jesus or the Holy Spirit," I can't tell them that they didn't. I
Mm,
can't. I wasn't there. I didn't experience the same thing that they did. Like, quite literally, all I can say is, I believe that you believe you experienced those things. But until you can demonstrate that that happened, I just don't believe you. But I don't discount that those things happened to you. And I'm sorry that, or it, depending on the situation, you can say, I'm sorry that those things did happen to you. I was very lucky in my case that my family was very accepting of me coming out as atheist. I kind of was leading to it for probably a year or two, I was kind of leading up to it on social media, posting, little things here and there, kind of poking people's interests. And even now, I have family members that are very, very heavy in it. Some of my best friends, too, are very heavily indoctrinated young Earth creationists. My neighbor is actually one of my best friends, and he's about as Christian as it gets. And but I was very lucky in my aspect that I don't have very much religious trauma. My
Yeah.
family was very, very accepting, because again, we weren't, super evangelical about it. We were just kind of finger pointing, "Hey, Jesus is watching, by the way." And I mean, they still think that Jesus is watching, that I'm going to burn in hell for all of eternity, but they're fine with it.
Yeah. That would actually be a good side tangent into something. So I said I accept a more probabilistic understanding of epistemology, and so I do think claims are evidence, just not necessarily proof. And I do think that evidence raises the prior probability of the proposition, and obviously that in theory there is evidence for everything. And so, to be perfectly fair, I do think that um, there's evidence for atheism, and even though I don't think it warrants belief necessarily, and I do think that there are Christian views that could be true, but not pragmatic. Because
Mhm.
that's another fun thing about life, is that there are propositions that just are facts that uh, are not useful to believe. Like, it's not useful to think that everyone passes away eventually,
Yeah,
um, but they do, right?
right.
So there are just times where you're gonna have to accept facts that we don't like, and so I find both to be true. But one of the things is, for in the realm of atheism, is that hell, the doctrine of hell, in the Christian sphere can be a pretty problematic thing. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if you have any particular experience with that, or have kind of um, had to deconstruct from that. But I guess talk to us a little bit about hell.
I never really had like a fear of hell. I honestly don't know if I ever even really believed it existed. I believe that heaven existed, but I don't think I ever believed that hell was a thing. And that kind of leads back to a lot of my indigenous roots. Is that a lot of my family, the indigenous people in my family, they don't believe that there is a hell. They believe that there is a paradise and that there is a purgatory. And essentially, that's where ghosts and spirits and these entities that you see, with wearing top hats and such in your house, those are spirits. They are spirits that didn't make it all the way to heaven, but there is no hell to go to. That's kind of very vaguely the position that my family personally holds, and it's a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of Native American superstitions mixed in there. At the same time, I kind of, my grandma fully believes that if you don't believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, you're gonna burn forever, and she will not be sorry about it. So that's the position my grandma holds, but then my mom holds a completely different position. So I don't know if I was necessarily scared of hell. I was scared of being stuck in purgatory. I was scared of being not in heaven with everybody. I was scared of having to like live in a house as a ghost forever. That sounded scary to me, and that people will be talking to me through ghost boxes and stuff. Um, you know, I I never really had a fear of that. So it's not really anything I necessarily had to deconstruct from, because I don't know if I really even believed it to begin with. But I did have to deal with the pain when I was first deconstructing, like, oh shoot, what if I'm wrong? It's all Pascal's wager. Like, what if I'm wrong
Yeah,
and my parents are right, and they go to heaven and I'm stuck here forever. I'm not with them. I'm not with, whatever God may exist. I'm not with them.
whether that's purgatory or hell, right?
Exactly. Whether I'm just bottom line, I'm not with my family, I'm not with my loved ones. What if that happens? But then you have to play that what if game with all the other 3,500 plus, religions and gods throughout the world.
Sure.
It's what if, Greek mythology is false and I have to go to Helheim or something. It's
Yeah.
or I guess that's Norse mythology, but um I never really had that fear. But one thing that I kind of wanted to touch on for a minute, that you mentioned, was evidence for atheism. what does that mean? Like evidence for atheism? Because where I come from
Well,
is
yeah,
atheism is the default. So we all are born atheists. We're all born lacking a belief in a God.
sure,
And then we are later either taught about that God, we read about that God, learn about a God, however it is through our society, we're indoctrinated into it. But bottom line is we are born lacking a belief in a God because we don't have the mental capabilities to register that, thought of a God.
sure.
So I would suggest, I'm just curious as to what evidence for lack of evidence is, in your opinion.
Right, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. So, evidence for atheism, as in evidence that would raise the prior probability of the statement there is no God. That's kind of what that's what I meant. That doesn't necessarily register with your understanding of atheism
Mhm.
as a lack of belief. But if you're making that proposition, you're going to defend the proposition there is no God. I do think there is, and that excuse me, I do think there is evidence for that understanding of atheism.
I gotcha. So you're kind of talking about like the Gnostic atheism position where people are making the positive affirmation that there is no God, and you believe that there is evidence that there is no God, as well as there being evidence that there is a God. So you believe kind of both have evidences on both ends?
Yeah, like I said, in theory, everything has some shred of evidence for it. It's just how good is that, and then how much does that raise
I gotcha.
the level of
I gotcha.
yeah.
And I would agree too, because you mentioned basically anecdotal evidence. I would never I have said, and I'm going to clarify this now. I have said that there is no evidence for God. And let me just clarify that, one, clickbait, you got to get people to stop on your video somehow. You got to get people to stop on your video somehow.
Yeah,
Started off by saying there is no God, and then go into what you're saying. Anyways, internet stuff. But in all actuality, I mean, anecdotal evidence is evidence. Anecdotal accounts are evidence. It's just, in my opinion, the worst possible kind of evidence. I would say that claims are evidence. Saying that a God does exist, I would say, a God exists because, I don't know, the Shroud of Turin exists.
yeah,
Great, cool. That is evidence. It's anecdotal, or like I believe God exists because I had a personal experience with them. It's anecdotal, but is it strong? No, it's not strong evidence. It's not good evidence. It is evidence. It's just not good evidence. So I would say that there is evidence for God. It's just not good evidence.
right. So then we have to go down the rabbit hole of epistemology of what the heck qualifies as good and evidence.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And then
Um,
we're on a whole other stream.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Um, But I could actually send you a video from an atheist where he kind of deals. He's an atheist philosopher, and he himself is like, let's critique some of the atheist claims here. Play devil's advocate, be fair, that sort of thing. And I thought he
Mhm.
did a really good job. But
Yeah, for sure.
one of the things that I do consider evidence for atheism is probably and specifically animal suffering, the problem of
Mhm.
animal suffering. If we're going to take, well, there are it's funny. There are people on both sides who are like, I'm not going to take this seriously, right? But if you're not a young earth creationist, from a Christian theological point of view, then you have to accept that there was a decent period of time where animals were suffering and things were suffering
Mhm.
in some way before humanity showed up, right? If you're a theistic evolutionist, then like I know Dr. Gavin Ortland talked about this in his video on the subject, and he said that like if you put all of like evolutionary history into a day, humanity's existence is like I think like the last minute or seconds or something like that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of time to
Yeah.
be um dying
Yeah.
going extinct,
I mean, if
and
we're going down that way, the Earth is what, 4.54 billion years old,
mhm.
and humans have only been around for the last like 10 to 15,000 years. So
Right.
it's a lot of missing time.
Yes. No, that's totally fair, and that's totally valid. So, Christians, I do think Christians have responses to it, and from a theological perspective, I think that they're decent. It's just they. So I'll give you one of them. Like I said, this is a sort of a Christian account, so I don't necessarily expect you to just suddenly believe this because I'm proclaiming it. But the explanation that's given is a not the fallen angel theodicy.
Mhm,
That's one of the explanations I heard. So the notion is that the reason why you have all this the suffering and things like that prior to human involvement is, and I would actually argue in the Genesis account, human involvement was actually supposed to help this issue. Um, uh, is the reason why you have that is because of fallen angels. So there was obviously a corruption that took place in heaven. Christian theology is rife with the understanding of fallen angels, things like that, both like the Watchers, just the general notion, and then Satan himself, right? So
mhm,
um, the notion is that they fell, and sin, the effects of sin, causes a corruption of the very good place that God made. But even beyond that, angels can actually be involved, and evil spiritual beings can actually be involved in the damaging of, um, excuse me, of the environment. And so that fits well, I think, with Christian theology, particularly in the West, when you go through, like so many theological traditions do, when you go through Augustine and then Thomas Aquinas, the associations both in biblical text and in Jewish and Christian tradition, the association between angels and the natural world. So then the notion becomes that like angels are themselves a part of the created natural world and thus would
mhm.
have the ability to affect it. Um,
And
and
then my standpoint would come from, so as soon as you say falling angels, they fell. Um, my next sentence is prove it.
right, you
You
would
know,
want to
and
demonstrate.
it's like, okay,
Yeah, that's fair.
that's plain, and then
Yeah,
you have evidence to support that notion happening, and then
right,
turn back to the Bible. It's like, okay, well,
right. Yeah. No,
you
yeah.
do. So
That's what I was saying.
yeah,
That this is a theological account that I don't expect atheists to just accept because
yeah,
it's been proclaimed, because we need that you have to assume that these theological categories exist, and then Christians do though.
right,
So it's like, okay, if a Christian is an old earth creationist, a theistic evolutionist, or something like that, uh, how do they account for this? And then they give
right,
the fallen angel theodicy as a way to account for it. But that is kind of the issue: is that it fits in Christian theology. Uh, I can't push it beyond that.
right,
Because if I were to push it to an atheist, of course, I would need to have at least some evidence that angels even exist, right? And for there to be a fall and things like that. Uh,
exactly,
and that's different than something like the free will theodicy, because an atheist can accept the existence of free will as a solution to the problem of evil. So, at least one of the versions of the problem of evil, because there are many versions.
oh yeah,
But so an atheist could accept that. Uh, and there's other things that an atheist could um accept too, even just an appeal to God's knowledge, right? It's like, okay, if God existed, if the Christian God existed, then he will have ample reasons to allow for suffering that we
mhm,
are not privy to, because he has all the knowledge that we don't, and more, right? So uh he would be, so even an atheist could accept something like that. You would obviously just have to say, give me evidence for God and things like that.
right,
But this, I don't know, like I said, I don't know how to push this theodicy um, past the Christian sphere. Even you could get into the realm of Judaism a little bit, and Islam, but like past the Abrahamic religion, you might say more broadly, I wouldn't know how to get it beyond
Right.
that. So, but so I do think that that would count as evidence for the proposition that there is no God if you're going to make such a statement. But obviously, I feel like I saw one of your TikTok videos though where you did say that there is no evidence for God. Maybe that was just a clickbait thing, but I think
Probably.
you were responding to a comment and you said, "Yeah, bro, there's no evidence."
Yeah. I mean, and yes, let's be honest. I mean, internet's all about clickbait. You got to get people to stop on your videos somehow. In all actuality, if you listen to what I am saying, if you listen to my positions, if you listen to more than one video, one clickbait video,
Right.
you would know, that my position is actually, which I have explained this in multiple TikTok videos for clarification, is that I believe that there is evidence. Is it evidence for this god or this god or this god or this god? I don't know. I guess you could consider it evidence. So I mean, to say that there is no evidence, I think is a dishonest position to have, because I mean, anecdotes are evidence. You could say, although I don't believe that the Shroud of Turin is authentic, that could be considered evidence. I don't think that the
If
Crown of
it were
Thorns is
authentic,
authentic.
it would be evidence.
Right.
I'd say, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. If it could be demonstrated as being an authentic piece of biblical artifact, then yeah, it's evidence. But
yeah.
it's been demonstrated many dozens of times over that it's not even authentic. So I wouldn't consider that evidence, but other people would. Again, claims, like you said, people making claims that could be considered evidence, dependent on the claim, of course. But yes, I mean, to say that there is no evidence for any God, not an honest position to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with you. I think that's pretty fair. So we've touched on morality. We touched on evidence for God and maybe some of the evidence for atheism. Um, do you think that? I guess one last question before we move on to one last thing. If there is, do you think that there is evidence? Well, I guess you kind of always said that there is evidence for anything in theory, and so there is evidence for the proposition that there is no God.
Mhm.
If you were to defend that proposition, what evidence would you bring? I know if I were playing devil's advocate, like I said,
So
I would
evidence
defend myself.
for no God or evidence for God?
Evidence for no God.
Evidence for no God. I would point towards philosophical arguments like the problem of evil, like we've already touched on. I believe that the existence of suffering and pain, it at least is evidence for against the God of the Bible, at the very least, because the God of the Bible claims to be an omniscient, omnipotent, all good God. I believe that the existence of suffering cancels that out right out of the gate. So the just by pain and suffering existing, that would be evidence against the God of Christianity, or specifically the God of the Bible. You could say something like that, or uh, evolution. I would say, the Bible, advocates for young Earth creationism. The existence of evolution and the concept of evolution being a thing here on Earth disproves literally the first sentence of the Bible. So I mean, that would be evidence against, again, that Bible, that God, or the God of Islam, as Islam has a very similar creation story, or the God of Hinduism, as the Vedas have a very different cosmology behind it. So the existence of evolution is evidence against those gods, or at least those God concepts existing. Um, can I disprove that there isn't a God, or can I disprove that there's a God, isn't a God that's on the moon behind a rock, that actually created the earth in 7 days or in 6 days and rested on the seventh day, and then he just, threw Jesus here and then ran to the moon and is hiding behind a rock there? Can I disprove that? No. So it's like, can I disprove a God exists? No, but I think that's the existence of philosophical arguments and the existence of pain, suffering, evolution, etc., science in general, most sciences disprove most of the gods that we know of existing.
Gotcha. So I'm kind of curious then. Have you listened to um people like Inspiring Philosophy and others who are theistic evolutionists, or I forget the one guy's name. I think he runs the ministry Reasons to Believe or something, but he's an older creationist.
Maybe.
Have you heard some of their arguments? Because I know Inspiring Philosophy in particular, I think has done a really job bringing a sort of cohesive interpretation of Genesis 1 through 11 that I think is plausible and does not negate evolution. But I
No, I
don't know.
don't think I've heard. I know of Inspiring Philosophy. I've watched a lot of their stuff. I don't know if I know of the thing that you're mentioning. No.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, I would be interested to get your thoughts on that, because like I said, I think atheists can read the Bible obviously and understand
Mhm.
things like that, and
Yeah.
so I would be interested to get your thoughts on something like that. But uh yeah, so let me transition a little bit now. So um you said that that's funny. You said that this me and this guy did a video, two videos, two live streams actually, defending the doctrine of the Trinity. So it
Oh,
was,
nice.
yeah. um I guess actually, since we brought up that comment, just quick side tangent, is the doctrine of the Trinity something that you I don't know, how did you interact with that doctrine and idea throughout your life, if you know and understand what it is to some extent?
Yeah, I was always under the understanding that, um, God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ were all three separate entities. Like they were separate people. God the Father, Jesus the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. That was my understanding. It honestly wasn't until I kind of was already in the atheist position that I even realized that there are people out there that believe that they were all one and the same. I don't come from the position that even if the Bible was true, God was real, etc., it's contradictory to think that they are all one in the same. To believe that they are all one single entity, it it doesn't add up in my opinion. That's just kind of where I come from. But yeah, my family's always kind of the standpoint that they were three separate entities. So that's always what I believed as a young
Gotcha.
lad.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so let me give you this analogy, and then you can kind of let me know what you think. I gave this analogy to the former to the other atheist. I don't know if you ever heard of Untestimony. She changed her name to
Hmm.
Atheist Earthling.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, she's a uh, popular atheist on TikTok, and I got to talk to her about a lot of this different stuff. But
Nice.
so the analogy that I used with her, and I got this from a philosopher who was arguing that the logical problem of the Trinity is not actually a problem. Um, basically, you can conceptualize the Trinity as being three statues, one of a mouse, a cat, and a dog, let's say. Um, so they're obviously different animals. They're posing differently. I think I even said in the last video that like the mouse just has this like weird frightened pose, and the cat is like chill, right? um but they're all made of the same material, which is, let's say, bronze, right?
Hmm.
So all three statues are made of bronze, but they are different statues, right? So there's a sense in which they're made up of the same substance, which is bronze, but they are different statues. They are three different statues, and so that's a way that I have conceptualized the Trinity, and that the persons are distinct, uh, and we call them persons because they seem to operate as such, right? And Christians will point out that like you can grieve the Holy Spirit, you can
Hmm.
blaspheme the Spirit, you can, right, so on and so forth.
Right, right.
Um, but so the notion would be that there are three distinct persons who share of the one substance. And this will get kind of philosophical, but I in particular am a monarchical Trinitarian. So I would even push beyond that and say that the Father, the one person, is the one who holds the substance. So he
Okay.
Yeah, so he
So
has the
he
bond.
basically is the bronze and distributes the bronze,
Yes,
essentially. Okay.
in some
Interesting.
way. Yeah. Jesus is uh, generated from the Father. I would just say that this has happened since eternity. Uh, but so the Son is generated from the substance of the Father, and then the Spirit. There's debate, and there's the whole East-West split because of the debate over whether or not or at least in part because of whether or not the Spirit proceeds from the Father or the Father and the Son. But either way, it proceeds, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, he proceeds. So that's kind of how I've explained it. I think that that works best with the biblical text, and I think that using that analogy avoid some of the more heretical analogies, like water, for example. That's just God changing forms, or avoid the whole conundrum of having parts in God, um, while also being understandable, even to someone who would disagree. So I
Right.
found that
Right.
analogy to be extremely helpful there.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't have to get too deep into it, but does that help at all?
That kind of, yeah, that does paints an interesting picture.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But so I want to move on beyond that to the text specifically of the Bible. So you said that even if the Christian God were true and the Bible is true, you would not worship.
Mhm.
Why is that?
I think that he is a genocidal, egotistical, maniacal, um, just really gross entity. And frankly, again, my subjective morality says I wouldn't follow Ted Bundy. So I wouldn't follow, an almighty, all powerful, all good God that's going to literally unalive 99.999% of the population if we're assuming that the Noah's flood happened, and left, all but 8 people alive and killed, literally every plant animal on the planet except for, two of each kind or whatever on the ark. That's not a God that I really want to follow, or a God that advocates for purchasing, your slaves from the nations around you, and keep the kids of temporary residence for yourself, and to pillage lands and keep the women and children for yourself, and to um, seek out and kill the Amalekites and the Hittites and, the Babylonians, and, you name it, unaliving all the children throughout Egypt that didn't, whose parents didn't spread goat blood on their door overnight. That's just not someone that I really want to be a part of. So, that's why I would, if a God, heaven, hell exists, I will happily take my place next to Satan and give him a crisp high five.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's understandable. I've like I mentioned at the beginning of this here, I'm doing a lot of research into slavery in the ancient Near East, the Old Testament, New Testament, church history, because I will. I don't know if this has been a frustration for you. I think it has, cause for some of your TikToks, but I will agree that uh, Christians um, and Christians who want to defend the faith have had a very have done a very poor job, particularly on the topic of slavery, as that has been my area of focus currently. Um,
Hmm.
I have not gotten into genocide and into that issue in the biblical text. I do know that there's a scholar who will what I can, as far as I can tell, to be a really good book, scholarly book on that issue, called, I think it's called um Flood and Fury.
Hmm.
It's called, yeah.
Okay.
So that might be an interesting thing to pick up.
Yeah. I like me a good book. So
Yeah,
check it out.
yeah. I think Dr. Michael Heiser has some very interesting thoughts on the Canaanite conquest. Um, so his work might be. I mean, he, even among critical scholars, that man is respected so much, and rest in peace to him. He passed away actually
Hmm.
recently, but yeah. So I know he had some interesting thoughts on that. But like I said, my stuff have been particularly focused on slavery. So I've been very frustrated to watch some of the debates that I've seen between Christians and non-Christians about biblical slavery, and just watch them like completely devolve into chaos because
Yes.
on the one hand, atheists will think that you're defending slavery if you're defending the Bible on this issue, which, considering how some Christians sound when they're doing this, that's fair. Um, and then, but I don't think that's true of everyone. And then on the other hand, you have Christians who are um, very dismissive of this critique. And they'll say, well, yeah, in ancient Israel, yeah, you had debt servitude. You basically had people working for a boss. And it's like, this isn't the NFL. I don't know.
Oh
Like,
boy, yeah, that's my favorite part is when they
I,
try to compare, American workforce to Middle Eastern, slavery and servitude practices from 2000 years ago. I'm like, there's a big freaking difference there, dude. Like,
yeah. No, I agree. I literally heard someone in a debate claim that like this is comparable to like the NFL
oh my, yeah,
analogy,
no,
and I
no,
just
like, sorry,
it's
but no,
not,
dude,
this is
no,
the
definitely
slave's not
not.
going out for a catch, okay? This is this is not that.
Literally.
So,
No,
yeah.
there's definitely frustration on both ends because there are, misconceptions about slavery in the Middle East back then. Kind of where I'm coming from is, you can only play semantics with owning people as property so many times. That's that like bottom line. It's they own people as property. Does my workplace own me? No, they don't own me because I can choose to leave if I want. I can
Right.
choose to not be in those shackles anymore. Bottom line is, especially if we're going down the American slavery route that was, pushed forth through the Bible. That you can't tell me they had a choice. Um, you
Yeah.
know,
No, definitely, yeah.
and if we're going back to like the Middle East, 2000-ish years ago, um, it they did they have more choice than American slaves? Arguably, um, but were they able to leave if they wanted? No,
Yeah,
they weren't.
yeah.
Um, they
That's
were owned. They were property.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you there. So I could, well, okay, let me voice another frustration here. Um, Kind of a frustration. So a lot of times in these debates we say, "Hey, let's just compare American slavery and the transatlantic slave trade to biblical slavery." And that's it dep that's understandable depending on what you're trying to do. If you're going into a debate about biblical slavery, then bringing up American slavery, even though it's understandable to say, hey, let's unstitch our ideas about slavery because Greco-Roman slavery is not American slavery. That's fair, but it depending on how far you take it, it almost seems like a non sequitur.
Mhm.
Like it seems like an irrelevant point to bring up to try to smooth over what's going on over here. You know what I
Right,
mean?
because they're two different things. They're not the same.
Yeah, yeah. But on the other hand, if we are going to just educate people about this, then yeah, it is really important to be like, yeah, what happened here is not this, right? And I also think it would be really important to point out the fact that I've been, like I said, I've been doing a lot of research on this, and while I am frustrated about what some Christian apologists have done, I definitely will say that the case that Christians made for owning slaves in the American South and abroad, um, is completely hermeneutically unsound. Um, their
Mhm.
their biblical arguments were dumb. um, I think one of the worst ones that I had to unstitch, unhitch or deconvert from myself was the notion that um, black people are cursed with dark skin, and that was put on them by God, and that it justifies slavery. So that goes back to Genesis 9 with the
Mhm.
curse there. So
And the Book
Noah,
of Mormon affirms this as well.
yeah,
In case anyone isn't aware, the Book of Mormon is incredibly racist. Like,
yes,
I'm telling you, like, if you think I'm lying, you haven't read it, because the Book of Mormon is,
yeah.
wow, it has a lot to say about black people.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yes.
and it's not good.
Yes, I definitely agree with you there. Um, but but yeah, that was the idea. So Noah, um, it's kind of funny how they misread the text here. But they're gonna go back to Genesis 9 when Noah gets drunk, something happens with his sons. People are very perplexed by this passage because it's not obvious what's happening here.
Mhm.
Um, for a few different reasons, but the slave owners will argue that yeah, Ham was cursed, and that he was cursed with dark skin. So the
Mhm.
curse that you will be a slave to your yeah, and so on and so forth was read by them. That's a complete misreading of the text, and abolitionists point this out. Like Canaan's cursed, and it's cursed by Noah, not God, right? So something else is happening here. And then of course, um, they did have a point, and I would agree with you and other scholars on this that the Old and New Testament do not have a a rallying cry against slavery
Mhm.
necessarily. So I will also grant that as
Yeah.
well, and that was brought up by the slave owners. Um, What's flawed, though, is their hermeneutic here because they're assuming that something done culturally that the biblical text comments on for its various reasons should therefore be done in the American South to black people. And
Mhm.
that's not that's flawed. That's very flawed reasoning hermeneutically. So you know, even if I granted a lot of the things that critical scholars say about the topic of slavery in the Old and New Testament, what they're doing in the American South is still not justified. And I do think it's important to bring that out because especially for me as a black person, because I deal a lot with um, black people online who are claiming like Christianity was never in Africa until slavery, and how could you possibly be a like literally one girl said, name something that's going on in 2022 that you don't understand, and she said black Christians. Like black people literally don't understand how we exist.
Right.
So and a lot of that just has to do with the Bible was used to mistreat us, and so now we can't accept this, right? And so I do think it's important for those reasons to make sure that we're unstitching the terrible interpretations of them with from the Bible itself because
Yeah.
they're yeah. So I do think that's important. But yeah, like I said, will I do think that it's fair for atheists to and other non-Christians to bring this up and say, what do you do with this?
Right.
Um,
I agree.
and it is a challenge. I can actually kind of present to the cases that I'm kind of working on here and see what you think in regards to this in particular. But um my what I the arguments that I like to bring up is uh the imperfection of the Mosaic law and the um and a more progressive argument. So um and these two arguments kind of work together, but basically as Dr. John Walton has pointed out, the Mosaic Law is meant to be a demonstration of God's wisdom in the context in which it is given.
Right.
Right? So this wisdom is wisdom. It's contextual though. Um, so it's not, and then as the book of Hebrews says, the Mosaic Law was not perfect, and nor could it perfect anyone.
Yeah.
So So I would grant that there are things in the Mosaic Law that we I will even say ought not do. So in the Mosaic Law, you have the idea that yeah, so you have the idea that um, the husband is kind of the head of the household and he's over the wife, the children, and the slave, right? Um, I don't think that needs to be the case,
Right.
right? So, um, and there's other things we could talk about, but so a Christian can admit that the Mosaic Law is imperfect. And then just to quickly summarize the other one, I would say that the Mosaic Law was meant to be a compromise with Israel and that they were advancing, that God was trying to bring them to a better place than what they were at the time. So it would be like if a doctor said, hey, instead of stopping drugs cold turkey to a drug addict, let's put you on this instead. And doctors have done that, right? So it's to kind of wean you off. And that's basically the progressive argument. I think that God was trying to progress them, but it was an accommodation, and Israel was a very, as we see in the Old Testament, was a very stubborn people. And so those two arguments combined, I think, do a decent job of dealing with slavery in the Mosaic Law. But you can let me know your thoughts on that real quick.
Gotcha. So essentially, instead of so like you mentioned how like doctors will prescribe a medication, try this instead. So essentially, it's God saying try Jesus instead. Is kind of, I guess, Jesus is the medication in that analogy.
Well, the Mosaic Law would be,
Right. The
yeah,
Mosaic.
yeah. So how does God have a relationship with a people who is stubborn and has been exposed to other things for hundreds of years, right? And so he accommodates them and their understanding at their time and gives them the Mosaic Law and other things to bring them to demonstrate him, his glory, his relationship with him, his wisdom, and to so that Israel can be a light to the nations, as the text itself says, and hopefully progress. I think.
Mhm. Okay. Interesting. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So like one quick example of something like that would be when Israel said that they wanted a king and God said, "Yeah, no, this isn't a good idea. Yeah, no." And then Israel's like, "No, yeah, we really want this."
Right.
And then God was like, "Okay, fine. You're not going to like it, but okay." So he gives them a king, right? So he this is a perfect example of what I think is the case. He's accommodating Israel. And because they are stubborn and hard-hearted people, and so that's how I view the Mosaic Law. In
Okay.
large part, yeah,
I gotcha.
yeah. That doesn't deal with the New Testament stuff, but
Right.
it does. It does help, I think, alleviate some of the sting of this objection.
I gotcha.
Yeah, you can let me know your thoughts on that. I'd be curious, but
So by Mosaic law, you're speaking of all the 613 laws, or okay. So then that would mean that God believes that by not eating fish, by not eating shellfish, then that would be an advancement in their society. Don't eat fish or don't wear mixed fabrics. Um,
um, It I don't not necessarily. I don't so for this argument to work in my understanding, I don't need everything in the Mosaic Law to be progressive. I just need there to be a direction towards that and then evidence that this is a direction that God wanted to move his people into. And then of course evidence that Israel was people who wrestle with God, right? So they were very stubborn and kind of wrestling with him uh, in that sense.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't need everything to be absolutely progressive. Um, not even all of the slave laws are progressive. I would just argue that again, he's demonstrating his wisdom to this particular ancient context
Yeah.
and is hoping to move them forward in the future. And we we can kind of see that the Mosaic Law could be changed and even adapted to different contexts, like the way they did things under the in exile is not going to be the same way they did things in the during the time of Moses, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know anything about that? So do you want to wrap up here? Again,
Yeah, sure.
mark. Okay. Um, yeah, so we can definitely have more talk on that in the future. I'm kind of working through the kind of like evil God critique
I got you.
systematically. So once I'm done with slavery, I'll move to genocide and the other things.
Right
Um,
on.
yeah, so I can definitely keep you
It's
updated.
a long process, so
It is. No, yeah. No, it definitely is. So, um, thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and give it. You can kind of give a closing and tell us where we can find your material.
Yeah, for sure. For the most part, if you go to linktree.com/Calvin Smith, that's most of my links here. I think Izzy is going to link most of them in the description of the episode. You can find my podcast, Unquestionable with Calvin Smith, on all streaming platforms and on YouTube. Again, I did end the show, so I'm not going to be posting any new content involving it, but I'm in the process of starting up my own kind of YouTube presence here. So you can follow me at Unquestionable Calvin on YouTube. You can go to Instagram at Unquestionable Calvin, TikTok, Unquestionable Calvin. Or if you go on Google and you just type in Unquestionable with Calvin Smith, it has literally everything involving me on there. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, like I said, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, pretty much everywhere. I have a Discord server. I don't really frequent there super often, but the more followers I get over there, the more frequent I'll be on there. I would like to start up doing some debates on my YouTube channel. I actually just posted a TikTok video yesterday talking about how I want to start doing this. So if you're a Christian, Hindu, Muslim, have a deeply held belief in a conspiracy theory or any other, religious or conspiratorial belief, send me an email, calsmithmusicinfo at gmail.com, and you can send me an email. We can set something up, maybe do an informal debate on my YouTube channel. Just talk about why you believe what you believe. I do my own original music. I'm a musician, so I have a song called Empty Room that's out on Spotify right now. It's been out for about 2 years now.
That is
So you
pretty
can give
cool.
that a listen. And yeah, I hopefully have an EP coming in the next year or so, but I've been saying that now for like 2 or 3 years now. Music is expensive to do, in case you didn't know, and it's very, very time consuming. So yeah, you can find me pretty much anywhere.
Yep, definitely go check him out. The links are in the description. Please go check out my link tree. You'll have access to all my social media, and as well as access to a website that I will actually start publishing on with a friend of mine, and also access to potential donations if you feel so obliged to. I don't like asking people for money. I'm not a prosperity gospel faith healer preacher, so I'm not. You know, they make me uncomfortable. But if you feel so moved to, then the option is there. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this. I hope this was a good conversation, and I hope it was helpful for you and got you to think, at the very least, about the things that you do believe. So thank you so much, and I will see you guys next time.